Welcome to Impact Unicorns, the podcast where you meet inspirational entrepreneurs building the next generation of transformative companies. And now, here is your host, Dr. Indranil Ghosh, award-winning author, investor, and advisor to global leaders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Impact Unicorns. Today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Thiel to the show. Christian is the founder and CEO of EnergyNest, a company with an innovative platform for decarbonizing industrial heating. Heating of homes, offices, malls, and industrial processes is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. It is also a segment of the economy that is hard to decarbonize because heating systems are still often set up to be powered directly from the combustion of fossil fuels. And within heating, industrial process heat accounts for 66% of the total carbon footprint. No wonder that Dr. Thiel's EnergyNest has been generating so much interest among industrial customers like fertilizer plants and refineries who are keen to use the company's thermal battery to meet their ESG targets. For higher temperature industrial processes above 300 to 400 Celsius, EnergyNest's Heatcrete, a proprietary form of concrete, is used to recover waste heat from the processes to be used elsewhere in the factory complex. But even more interestingly, for lower temperature applications below 200 Celsius, renewable electricity from wind or solar plants can be stored as heat in the thermal battery before it is distributed to heating applications. By helping with heat recovery and the renewable electrification of industrial processes, EnergyNest is playing a key part in unlocking the vast opportunity in industrial heating as an asset class. This breakthrough has not gone unnoticed by investors. EnergyNest was courted for an IPO earlier this year before they switched track to receive a €110 million investment from Infracapital, a leading European infrastructure investment fund. Now, just as interesting as EnergyNest is Christian's evolution as an impact entrepreneur himself. In this episode, we chart his rise from a youth behind the Iron Curtain in East Germany to senior roles in the BMW Group, in M&A banking at UBS, and strategy consulting at McKinsey. But eventually, Christian's passion to generate global impact led him away from the comforts of corporate life to the challenges of entrepreneurship at EnergyNest. Christian, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Indranil.
Christian, I'm really delighted to have you on this episode because one of the topics that is so difficult to address in the decarbonization debate is heating issues. Decarbonized heating, not just of residential and commercial buildings, but actually of industrial facilities, because so much heat is used in industry, and it's obviously powered by hydrocarbon-based sources of energy at the moment. Now, you've been doing some amazing things with your company, EnergyNest, to help to decarbonize that very difficult problem. So we'll definitely get into that later in the show. But first of all, I'd love to know a bit more about Christian Thiel, or Dr. T, as your new moniker seems to be. Tell us about, your journey as a professional and as an impact entrepreneur.
My journey, where to start? I think first up, I always wanted to become a medical doctor. Actually, since I was a child, and I had my university slot already booked, but then I joined the German military. That was back in 1996, and they became part of the first NATO mission ever. Before that, the German army was always doing UN stuff. So this NATO mission was basically to enforce the Dayton Agreement, ultimately to bring peace to the ex-Yugoslavia region, secure the first democratic elections, provide food to those who didn't have food, etc. To cut a long story short, while I was deployed there with my paratrooper unit, we did a lot of teamwork and joint missions with comrades from other nations, Canada, US, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, but also Russia. And what I quickly noticed is that I very much enjoy international teamwork. and international teamwork in international settings on missions that really matter. And that kind of like became my new prerogative then to work in such settings. And I guess that kicked off me venturing into the business arena, ultimately switching college careers then before having ever started to study medicine, but to then switch to a business degree and to combine that business degree with a lot of internships abroad. First of all, to harvest on the opportunity to learn internationally, but also to acquire some languages. So I did internships in Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, studied for my bachelor in Ireland, the master's back in Germany, US, obviously, etc. And that kind of like became a companion, that international setup throughout the years. And I think, after college, it starts with a career. So I went to a big corporate, automotive corporate, which was great learning, great products, etc. On the flip side, I quickly noticed that, you're just a small, tiny wheel of a big machine. And although this is great if you can identify with a product back at the time, you notice that your freedom to operate is very limited. So what I did then is basically, after this automotive career, I changed into investment banking and then into consulting. And then via consulting, again, working abroad, I really found my passion for energy transition topics, be it deployment of renewables or solving grid transmission issues, or being at industrial sites and being exposed to all the energy inventories in such an industrial site. Then I basically, out of consulting, then transitioned into the renewable energy. So I joined a northern Germany-based wind turbine manufacturer. And that was a lot of fun, because at the time wind was, it was just after, I think, Germany declared then the exit from nuclear power, full steam ahead, so to say, on wind turbine. Wind became a commodity already in Europe, and then was really about tapping into new markets. Very exciting. So I was leading amongst other departments, the new markets team, etc. And for some reason then, the new topic came up, energy storage. Okay, the PV and wind is really commodity already. Now it's about storage. And as it happens in life, I was approached about this opportunity to join a very young company, startup, just 3 years old in Norway, called EnergyNest. And a very small team back in the day, financed by a handful of private investors. And it just seemed right. So I went to Norway, met the people, met the team, and saw, wow, this is a great opportunity, but there's lots of work to do. But this is fun, because the people are fun. They're mission driven. You can contribute with your very own skill set that you have acquired in the corporate consulting, investment banking, and renewables, and really help this team of EnergyNest to move forward. Yes, and this is now a decision I had taken 7 years ago, and here we are. Here we are, having come, quite some steps further, and really, as you said, Indranil, this topic of heat. I think, we're just starting to awake a sleeping giant, and the giant has a very ugly side to it, and we're here to heal this. And this ugly side to the giant, industrial heat, is basically that a lot of this, so the vast majority, is generated by fossil fuels, and that needs to change. And we're here to help facilitate that change as one of the technologies that could be a key enabler for solving the industrial heat problem.
If you're enjoying Impact Unicorns, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to receive notifications of new shows. Bring the most relevant impact venture stories to the podcast. If you would like to review the show, go to the Apple Podcasts mobile app or iTunes to leave a rating and review.
Interesting, some themes coming out from your discussion of your personal journey. You're clearly someone who loves to explore. You can see that in the thread about international exploration and exposure. You're learning about different parts of the world, different cultures, I'm sure. Also, your desire to work in teams that span boundaries, to bring together talents and perspectives that lead to innovative solutions. I can see how all of this led you to become an impact entrepreneur. But also there was a period in your career where you seem to be honing your basic skills, in investment banking and consulting, in industry. How did that tipping point occur from working in a large corporation, yes, where you're a small wheel in a larger machine, but where you're learning so much in a structured way, to the more ambiguous, amorphous journey of building a company in an industry that even doesn't have any rules, perhaps, at the time?
Yeah.
So from that sort of structured, more definitive pathway to something that is so open, blue skies, if you like.
Yeah. Good question. I think it's a combination of three things, perhaps. I mean, first up, I was born and raised in East Germany. And, when the wall came down and the Iron Curtain opened and on the German side, I was 12 years old. So I was young enough to adapt to a new society. But I think what I also inherited is memories to a system where individuality and out of the box thinking was not necessarily appreciated. That's number one. I think this is the explanation why I have such a curious mindset. Part of it. I mean, there's also some intrinsic curiosity, but I think, being able to not see and visit family in a different country because just it was on the Western side, being spied upon as a family, etc. I mean, that leaves a taste, right? And it's kind of like probably deeply impacting the way you perceive the world and the way you want to go out once you have a chance to explore the world. Second is, I then followed a very safe route, which is going with big corporates. It's great because some corporates do a fantastic job. You work, with peers that are like-minded. You're part of a much wider thing than yourself. On the other hand, in my experience, you do not always get the benefits of exploring your limits, really. Of course, you're being pushed and there's reviews, etc. But what is really intrinsically motivating you? And are you being your best in putting not only your skills, but your personality onto the line each day to become a better person and help to make things better? And that was not really fostered. So in my point, and I was then, after the corporate second aspect, now the third aspect is I experienced quite late, so in my mid-30s, when I switched into the entrepreneurial track, where I would really say I do entrepreneurial work, that it was quite a surprise that when you really have a conviction for something, you put your resources behind it, and you join with like-minded people, that you can do much more than you thought you could do. And that is not just a thrilling experience, but it becomes also an addiction. You want to push the limit out and out and out and out, where no one has really been. And this is what you alluded to, probably, the exploratory path that I follow. It's really these things coming together. And, my wish for other people who want to go that route is really, I very much hope that people can do this much sooner than I have done. And obviously there's no limit, even if you discover at 50 or 55, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, go for it. If that's your setting and that makes you happy, just go for it. It's never too late. But ideally, people can come into positions to making this determination much, much earlier. That's one thing. And the other thing I want to say is, even now at EnergyNest, for instance, we're a small team. We're currently, I think we are 14, but we just issued 4 new contracts, and we want to grow within 1 year to 40. So it's quite a journey. But given the setup of our particular company, what we also do is we don't have a super strict hierarchy where everything is determined in terms of a job description. So we look for still entrepreneurs that join our company and take responsibilities for areas, where I'm not an expert, or my CFO or CTO are not an expert. So people who are exploring with us to pave the way towards, in our case, decarbonize industrial heat, particularly, and flexibilize power generation. So it's really about, I think, in essence, having a self-reflection, daring, daring to do something different. And then very important, and that's probably the most important enabler, finding a team setting that helps you grow and enables you even more. Because, some people are, Wunderkinder and can do that themselves. And, they do fantastic one-man shows and gain a lot of success. That's great. A lot of us aren't really that, but we're stronger when we're in a community, and that can be a team. And finding that team of like-minded people is just such a great asset. There's so much energy for yourself, but also for others in this. This is really what I see probably each week at work, that 1 + 1 is 3 or 4 or 5, not just 2. And that can become an addiction. I have to tell you, it's, if you exceed your wildest imaginations or dreams and push something forward and see it gain traction, that is something. And that is a big part of, to me, what is life about, next to love for your family, and being happy. But I think happiness comes to large part from that, from seeing what impact you can deliver once you make up your mind, find like-minded people and gather just to put resource to a certain task.
What you described reminds me a lot of an elite team athlete. And this is a theme that's coming through in a lot of the interviews that I'm doing on this show. This idea of working every day to make yourself a better version of yourself, continuous improvement. But then not only that, making yourself from 1 to 2 to 3, so that, and then working in a community where 1 + 1 = 3, but then the following day, 3 + 3 = 15. This incredible synergy that you're able to bring about in your team is a real key to success. And this ability to visualize a dream and then make it in reality. Okay, put it in reality. Tell us a little bit, as a CEO, how you transmit this from your own experience into the team around you, how this culture of continuous improvement, working towards a mission, making a purpose and a dream into reality. How does that manifest itself in day-to-day things that you do?
Yeah, I think what I see is that there's also a transition taking place, depending on when if you found a company or when you join it. So for instance, when I joined EnergyNest, it was a lot about doing it yourself and bringing that skill set, from consulting, for instance, or banking. Like, okay, what are the key analysis that we do? How do we set up a project? Who leads the project, etc. And when I came in, we were so small that all the project related and economic stuff that was under my leadership, and I tried to role model from the front line, so to say, right? Obviously, that changes at some point, and the way I would see it now is that I'm probably more of a football coach. Because as we grow the team, and we will continue to grow the team, but it's more like you have a team and you can't do everything yourself, and you shouldn't, because you're not the best expert. But what you can do is to keep the overview and motivate people. And, there's the goal getters who are really eager, very competitive, and they score your goals. That would typically sales folks or project development people. On the other hand, you have the goalkeeper, who just needs to, keep the goal clean, ideally, and those are your key engineers. Really, it's not about scoring goals. Their mission is very different, and their motivation needs to be a very different one than for the goal getters. So as we grow along, I think it's very much about making sure that you have the right talents on your transfer list early, so that you and really enhance your team and grow your football team. But then it's very much about seeing that people feel very not comfortable, but challenged and supported in their positions. And obviously part of that is also that you at the beginning of the season, you say, okay, guys, we're in this to win the Champions League, obviously. So the mission needs to be very clear to everyone. And then you help people basically perform daily at their best. And also, when they're injured, you take them out, you give them rest to heal. You give them coaching or training, and you put someone else in the position. So, I mean, that's all part of it. So I think there's a transition, and you need to probably, as an entrepreneur and CEO, be able to play a broad facet. You need to be this person who can go in and do it yourself and also show how to lead, and that you're not too precious to execute tasks yourself, work late nights, compile documents, calculate models, entertain customers, engage customers, find investors, all of this. But also as you go along, you'll get experts. And there's this famous saying that people, you should always hire people who are better than you, and it can be somewhat uncomfortable. But on the other hand, if you make the right choice and work with these people who are better than you, it helps. You will not rest yourself. You will learn. You will feel challenged. You want to contribute even more. And this is just a firework then that sets off. And it's hard work, but it's very, very rewarding.
Over the past 20 years, I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs to build impact unicorns. In my experience, every company that has a transformative positive effect on the world does so by building strong partnerships with communities, investors, and governments to solve society's biggest challenges. If you'd like to learn more about how innovative entrepreneurs can help to build a more sustainable and inclusive future, read my award-winning book, Powering Prosperity, A Citizen's Guide to Shaping the 21st Century.
Let's switch gears to talking about the company, EnergyNest. You described a little bit of how you came to it, how you've been growing it, and this wonderful image of the transition from player to coach as you lead the company. Tell us a little bit about what actually the company does and what problem it's solving in industrial heating, and the customer base that you've built up.
Yeah. So for the collaboration, we have developed a modular, solid-state, freely scalable thermal energy storage solution. And obviously, our means to that is thermal battery that you also see in my background. That's one of our modules. Project would typically be composed of several of these modules, but it's not really about these modules. It's about bringing solutions or services to customers. So that's one part of it. And then the question is, what do we do? And we started early and we did a lot. 2011, we're now in 2021, so it's 10 years old, the company. And we have closed our first projects. We are executing 2 projects currently. One is with the chemical company or fertilizer producer Yara. The other one is with Eni, Italian oil and gas company. So we've come to the path of commercializing our technology really. And fingers crossed, in a couple of days or weeks from now, we sign another contract. So there's progress. And obviously we have a global pipeline of projects that we constantly mature. Now, what is the problem that we solve? The main problem that we are up to solving is, on the one hand side, to improve the carbon balance of industrial heat or process heat, and on the other hand, to flexibilize power generation, especially in the renewables. So basically, making concentrated solar power, for example, fully dispatchable. Or a new trend that we see, CST, so concentrated solar thermal, which is industrial heat generation via solar thermal processes, to make this basically also dispatchable, not only during the day when the sun shines, but also during the night with the means of our storage now. It gets a bit tricky. If you look at, and there's global numbers, but there's a problem sometimes with getting consistent numbers. There's a study quite recent from last year on the European total energy demand. And I think it's from a study from Burr, who looked at strengthening heat pumps and innovation to decarbonize industrial heat. And what is interesting is that the total energy demand in Europe can be decomposed into, some non-thermal consumption, obviously space heating and cooling processes, but also process heating. This is the industrial stuff. 66% of total energy demand in Europe is based on process heating for the industry. That's a big number. And if you just think about, if you can impact that, this is really helping global decarbonization, because it's such a big lever and it goes beyond, what we can impact on all buying electric vehicles, for example. So just for calibration. The other thing is then this process heating, the 66% that I just mentioned, based on this study, is largely done by fossil fuels. So that's gas, oil, coal, or other fossils. And this needs to change. And what we offer with our solution, and now I'm basically coming back to what I originally said about our thermal battery, is the 66% process heating number. I think we address about 90% of this with our solution to decarbonize. One is addressing really the higher temperature regimes of that process heat, is where we offer waste heat recovery solutions or enhanced waste heat recovery solutions. So, if you take, let's say, pulp and paper production or steel production, you have big kilns or furnaces or smelting processes that generate heat. We would enable our customers to capture this heat and then to utilize this stored energy on demand, for instance, to generate process steam down the line for batch process, etc., and not use separate natural gas-fired boilers. So clearly, increase energy efficiency by harvesting the energy potential in a industrial facility and apply this energy as a primary energy for that customer instead of using fossil fuels to generate heat in a conventional way. That's one element. The other element, and this comes down more to lower grid heating requirements. So what I just mentioned, waste heat recovery would be typically 500 degrees C and above. On the lower heat, this would be anything from 100 to 500 degrees Celsius. We help our customers to, for instance, either electrify the operations. So we would typically harvest renewable electricity, convert this into heat into our storage, and then serve process steam grids from the thermal battery to feed constantly based on renewables that you harvested at when it was available. Or to go for these newly involving CST projects, where customers, even in Central Europe, now start utilizing solar thermal energy simply to offset natural gas production for generating industrial heat that is a bit of a lower grade. So let's say 200 to 300 degrees Celsius. Super exciting segment to be in. And this is the last thing I would like to say, Indranil, is we really, as a company, and this is also, why we're somewhat already leathernecks of the energy transition, I think you could call us, is no one wanted to hear this until about pretty much 18 months ago. It was always, well, heat is not really a problem. It's all about, electrifying everything, and PV and EVs will be the solution to the energy transition, but they're not. The fossil fuel dedication and allocation towards industrial heat is so big that we can really help to change the system without really, interrupting industrial production. And that's an important element. We don't have to go back to Stone Age just to decarbonize. We can be smart about our approaches. And industrial heat will be a big, big enabler and a big lever in getting us there and meeting and hopefully overachieving our 1.5 degrees temperature saving target. Because what we do, decarbonizing industrial heat, is a big, big contributor to a decarbonized world. One of the biggest levers out there. And this is this is European heat. Just put this into perspective into American heat, North American heat, Chinese heat, Indian heat. There is so much more to do. We just happen to be started in Europe. Our footprint right now is an office in Oslo, office in Hamburg, office in Seville. We grow from Europe and do the first projects here. But this on a global scale is decarbonization really on steroids. And this is where we have to get in a good way this time. Yeah. It's really moving the needle for decarbonization. And this is in essence what EnergyNest is all about. And this is why we all have such a super strong mission to push what we do. And, be it hard times or good times. Obviously, it's more fun in the good times, I have to admit.
Of course. But interestingly, the whole terminology around thermal battery is very revealing, because the whole art of decarbonization is about energy transfer. But unfortunately, sometimes the capital markets get obsessed with just one pathway, right? So electricity from renewable sources into a lithium ion or other battery to move a car. And okay, now we're completely solved in terms of, averting climate change. Of course we're not. There are many other pathways, but that need to be decarbonized. And I think the elegant thing that you talked about, particularly for low-grade industrial heat, is this idea of taking that same renewable energy, but now you're not converting it into motion, you're converting it into heat, storing it in a thermal battery, and then transmitting that heat to lower temperature industrial uses, which is an incredibly elegant solution, I think, for doing pretty much the same thing as an electric vehicle. It's just that now you're going from renewable electricity through a different pathway to industrial heat in low-grade applications.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think the capital markets are realizing this bit by bit. And, part of this is already, there's, I think 2-3 weeks ago, there was an article, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, talking really about industrial heat. So this topic is really submerging. And there's, you can't really deny it. It's just probably industrial heat is very hard to, you cannot touch it, you cannot feel it. It's hard to grasp, to understand, to really picture the severity of this issue. It's not like my favorite example, it's not like a Tesla that you can take for a test drive, get in and, oh yeah, this is sexy, and which it is, right? And as for many other electric cars, they are, but it's really tangible. And I think industrial heat is not really tangible, and that's the problem. But I think, also our investment, the round that we successfully closed in August this year, 110 million investment by Infra Capital Partners, shows that capital markets are really going on to the next thing, which is industrial heat. And I think, electricity and renewables are well understood commodities now. Perfect, transition that took place. And now the question is, what's next? And I think industrial heat is a big part of the answer to what's next, where we can still, explore grounds to change things, do things new, do things differently, really be pioneers in harvesting potential that so far hasn't been unlocked. And this is, it has been a transition. And what I also see is that's number one. So capital markets, yes, are realizing. Number two is when I was in, we have been funded by family office, largely high net worth and friends and family in the past, before this big round we just did. And I think when was it? 2017. We were exploring grounds and did some interviews with investors in I think UK, and also went to Sand Hill Road in California. And we were told, oh, you need to digitize everything. Oh, your business model is not digital, or your product is not digital. It's not an app, so sorry, can't fund you. I'm bluntly over-exaggerating, but the notion was basically, if you don't have an app or something just digital to offer, you're not hot. And everyone was shying away from hardware investments. What we see now is a complete shift. And that shift is really that investors are starting to look for decarbonizing infrastructure projects. And that is exactly what we do. We build energy as a service projects, or projects with a certain leasing structure. It depends always on the geography and what you can do accounting wise, etc. But we recognize the capital constraints of our industrial customers. They're not there for building energy infrastructure. They're there to do food and beverage productions, or packaging, or producing steel pipes or alloy ingots. That's really where they're good, and focus on quality improvement and cost reduction, etc. Now, by providing our solution and enhancing their energy balance and decarbonization balance, and also helping them to achieve their ESG targets, which is very important for us, helping our customers to move the needle in ESG and obviously by the means of decarbonization with our quite safe products, is that we take away the capital constraint for allocating amounts of money for these infrastructure type projects, basically saying, look, you don't have to buy this. You don't have to allocate dedicated budgets to this. And we understand that, this year budget is full, next year's you have already planned, etc. So by offering these finance solutions now, we can talk about savings from day one with these customers. And this is an investment theme, and that's why I was making this point, is that we see more and more resonating because it's highly attractive. You have a decarbonization infrastructure, you have a customer that is benefiting from this, there's contribution from these solutions. This is highly sexy infrastructure to move in. What do you do also? Coal-fired plants and gas-fired plants are not, they're not hitting the theme of the times anymore. So these decarbonization projects are extremely interesting to look at. And this is something that we clearly sense, and I'm sure there's many other companies out there with similar offerings. So it's kind of like, the time for decarbonization hardware is becoming very attractive. And obviously there's the whole notion about digital business model around it. But that's an enabler basically then for the assets that we create. Yeah. And we certainly also look at this. But I think what is helpful now is that hardware, if it's contributing to decarbonization, is a very attractive investment scheme. We've just seen the beginning, and I think this will increase over the next few years.
Being an impact entrepreneur is really all about shaping and developing new markets, and it's a huge challenge. And what I hear you saying is you've gone about this in a rather systematic manner. You started with your customer, industrial companies making fertilizers or chemical factories or whatever it is that they make. You provided a clear solution for them to decarbonize, which is also finance. So it's a bit like an energy savings company model from what I can understand. So what people do when they retrofit buildings, they go to the building and they say, look, we'll put in the energy efficient lighting and heating systems, and then we'll finance that, and you pay us back from a share of the energy savings. You're taking that model and now applying it to the much bigger arena of industrial process heat, providing this finance solution. So basically, you not only solve the customer's technical problem, you solve their capital constraint problem. And of course, it won't be long before investors, even institutional investors, will cotton onto this and say, well, this is a really investable asset class. And I call it an asset class because I think that's the scale that we're talking about. And it's a global asset class. So your pipeline extends from North America, Europe, all the way to Asia, Australia, I believe, as well. So literally covering the entire planet. So it's a global asset class. So I think that's a lesson in how to shape a global market. And if you put it in those terms, the 7 to 10 years that you've been at it may sound like a long time to people, right? But this is what building an impact unicorn is all about. It's not just having local impact. It's a global problem that you're solving in a systematic, replicable manner. And this makes you scalable, makes you a potential unicorn. And so it's really not surprising that you were able to get that round of funding from Infra Capital, which I think brings me to the next question, because in every company and every entrepreneur's journey, funding is that thorny topic which can take up a lot of time and cause a lot of sleepless nights. The beauty of the market right now in renewable infrastructure is that fortunately we're seeing many more channels to funding opening up. So, a few years ago, you were saying it was all about family offices, and now, there are funds like Infra Capital available who can fund your project. But at some point, you also considered the IPO route at this relatively early stage in your corporate story. So tell us a little bit about these different channels of capital and how, you went about making an election for going one way versus another. Because there were many sources of capital available to you as a potential unicorn.
Absolutely, yes. And just to the previous point, yes, it has been quite a journey since 2011 when we were founded. But what they say in the energy business, it takes about 10 years to become an overnight success. So I think we successfully checked this, or at least are starting now on a successful journey based on our first projects that we're just constructing. But yes, funding, super important point, and the best business idea is nothing without the right backers. And I think there's a time for every sort of backer. So, our start wouldn't have been possible without family office, with dedication, high net worth people who basically believe and back you with resources, etc. And we have come from a history where probably every year we have done a funding round just to finance next year's budget and see if we, fulfill our targets, etc. And this is how we had grown our supporter bases. But now I think, and this was largely the consideration in, throughout last year and then, till this year, is what is the right next step for the company? And you see two models. Now with the spec, there's three models, but in principle, you can choose to either be a private company and continue to be a private company with its pros and cons, or you can choose to list on the public markets with its pros and cons. And we did explore both routes to a greater detail and really came down to a position that we could make a choice based on what's best for the company. And obviously there's a process element and, negotiations behind this. And when you come to the point where you really can switch the button, you better make the right choice. And the question to us, we took, once we were at this point where we could switch the button, we stepped back 10 steps and we said, look, what is really the right path for this company? And mind you, when I was said, we are 14 now, obviously expanding, but we looked at ourselves and said, what is good for this company? And we saw this IPO route and we said, it's instant capital. We can pretty much allocate the company resources with the IPO as we want. That's great from a management perspective. You create an opportunity for your shareholders to sell their shares. It's a liquid market. You can compare yourself to the peers who are already listed. So there's a competitive element, obviously. But then comes all the cons, which is about you're not really in full control because you're also subject to market sentiment. If markets go down, you go down. If markets go up, you go up. You have to create a very steady and strong news flow in order to be perceived by outside investors as sexy and investment worthy. Plus, there's the whole regulatory aspect that you need to create your own overhead in order to manage being a public company. And let's just assume for the sake of fun of it that the valuations are about the same on the stock market and private investment. And then we took the other route to look at, and there was the private investment, ultimately ICP, and here we saw a lot of benefits compared to the public route for where we were and are as a company. And that is, we build infrastructure type of projects. Asset class was your keyword to it. We are embarking on a commercialization. So that means, yes, we have projects, we have a strong pipeline, but converting this pipeline into projects that are executed takes time. This time is, you don't have news on a weekly basis for stock market news flow. So we need to, let's say, test our business model. What really resonates? Where do we need to change our business model? Another factor for time. So cut a long story short, what we really found is this company needs a probably strong partner with a very strategic interest in what we do and what we want to offer to the market. And that strategic aspect has so many benefits compared to us just being, publicly listed with no strong shareholder, but, free float investors buying and selling your share, and us being on our own. So for us, the scale was tipping towards the point that we said, we need something more than money, because the money, the funding we can get on the stock market, but we need something more than money. We need something that helps us. And, with ICP, we found a shareholder that has a very strong interest in working with management and tackling the problems. This, by the way, also we are set up now. This is a structure, very frequent board meetings and working group meetings and, flagging, hey, we need, this is all expertise we would not have acquired with the IPO, but rather would have to have insourced. And then again, the question is, have you foreseen the fund for this insourcing? What is the areas? Is it just one or the 10 areas where you need expertise, etc.? So you look at something that's really eating up management time, whereas when you're aligned with your investor, which a fund typically can be very well, is there's so many synergies that you unlock all the way that I think for fast value creation in a commercialization setting, in our case, the private investment was definitely the preferred route, and already see it that, we can keep our administration relatively lean and focus on business, which is really sales and engineering and project management, so delivering and all the rest of it, like developing the supply chain, building a strong organization. That is a focus. I think it probably would have been more difficult for our company focusing on capital markets appeal with the majority of our efforts from early on, because we need to really create our business, really build those incredible revenue streams that we think we can generate with our customers. And until then, there's a lot of hard work and dedication to do. And I think the best way to be successful with this work is the most undistracted way. Really focusing on the path, on the company strategy, on the business plan. And with capital markets, for us, it probably would have been significantly more difficult to set the focus and significantly more, distractible from a management perspective. So this is simply why, at the end of the day, having both options is really great. But for us, the choice was quite clear and easy to make. And it all comes down to, can you work with the people on the other end of the table? There's, a strategic aspect, there's a biochemistry aspect, there's a joint vision that you develop in these processes. And, with a strong fund, I think you can achieve a lot. Sure, you don't have maybe possibly the glory of capital markets if things go well, but let's do the work first. Let's really deliver value to customers, show how we can help being a big part of the puzzle towards decarbonization. And then, in 3-4 years, whatever the time horizon is, one can always look at, okay, what is the next best strategic option for the company? But for now, I think we have a great setup for our resources. Everyone knows what the mission is. We can gather our people behind the plan, no distractions from left and right, and work is, really hard enough. So I'm very happy that we have this ability to focus, which is such a beneficial position to be in when you can have the right focus just set. Still hard enough, but you know where to go.
Yeah, I see the team athlete, the team coach thinking coming through again. So now you're not just coaching your internal people, but you're working with your customers. They're part of your team. And now you have an investor. You're bringing that subject matter expertise and you're expanding the team across organizational boundaries, right? And getting that chemistry to work, a larger group of people. You may be 14 inside your company, but actually if you include your lead customers, your investors, you're much bigger than that. And getting that entire team focused behind this mission and realizing the vision is giving that multiplicative effect, which you described as addictive, and I can certainly see that. And perhaps a little bit further down the road, you have the next stage of the market shaping and development, which is to go maybe to the public capital markets and start building that story so you begin to capture the public imagination as well and make this potentially the next Tesla. Because, when you're going through that scaling journey, the capital injections don't come in linear lumps. It doesn't increase linearly. As you've seen, it's quite exponential. So perhaps to get the next slug of capital, it's not 100, it's several hundred million or even larger. And that may take story building, news flow, and public imagination to get there. But one step at a time, I guess.
Exactly. One step at a time. We now have, I think, a bit of time to really bring on our business case and be successful. But there's one part of public attention that I do wish for sooner, and that is not really the public capital markets, but really that the public becomes more receptive to what what levers we can influence now in order to have a big harvest on decarbonization. And, it's personally, I ride my bike. We have a small electric car for the city that we utilize when we go, buying larger chunks of groceries and commuting in city when necessary, etc. But decarbonization is not all about PV panels on a private house. It's not just about, the next offshore wind park. It's not about only infrastructure, charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. There's more to this, and tackling the heat market and the vast, amounts of fossil fuels still going into this industrial heat market, and decarbonizing this is really the next big step. And I wish for some more public awareness, which is a call to media really and policymakers to recognize this. And I think our answer to this, and this is really the first real milestone in terms of public awareness that I hope for, way before the next sort of capital funding, etc., is really that there's recognition for, yes, we have a big topic here. It's actually a problem how we fire our industrial world at this stage, but at the same time we can start healing this problem and enable our industrial landscape, which is a big contributor to public wealth, jobs, everything, growth, technology, that we can give them the tools at hand to decarbonize while not just keeping their operations, but improving their operations, becoming more efficient, more cost intensive. And this is the media needs to talk about this. Largely, they still do not do that. So big call to media. And second, policymakers, because on the one hand side, I'm a big fan of rising CO2 prices and us, paying tax for carbon emissions. On the other hand, you can't just tax the hell of everyone. So I think while we increase taxes for CO2 emitters, governments must offer incentives for those who transition into a clean future. So it's really more about shifting capital, right? Yes, taxing the bad habits from yesterday, but incentivizing the move towards the new solutions for tomorrow, or actually today it is. So that people and companies can transition without really, having no foundation for economical business. And, we just had elections yesterday in Germany. I hope that our new government sets much stronger impulses and a clear direction towards this path. And we see in some countries, for instance, Netherlands, who do a fantastic job and incentivizing really projects with a big carbon payback or carbon reduction logic going forward. So I think this is the way to go for industrials really to stay within Europe and not just to run abroad, whilst transitioning to become carbon neutral, as one of these many ESG aspects that are so important for us to really create a better tomorrow.
Well, with the IPCC report that just came out a few weeks ago, just reaffirming what we already know, that we have a very short fuse to solve the decarbonization problem, this kind of awareness building and policy support and regulatory engagement is going to be so critical. So I think there's plenty for us to talk about in future shows, future episodes. I'd love to have you back again, Christian. It's been wonderful talking to you. But for now, let's say adieu and wish you the best of luck in building your pipeline and getting your European Champions League team to be firing on all cylinders to deliver. A great story here. Thank you so much for your time.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Impact Unicorns, don't forget to rate and review this show by scrolling down and clicking Rate This Podcast. And join me next week as I talk to more inspirational entrepreneurs building the next generation of transformative companies.